shown you how to create a connection to the database. Now we will be making a separate class file. By calling that class file, we will be creating a connection to the database, and using that connection we will be doing some making some changes to the MySQL workbench databases. So let me make a database. Let me create a Python file, and I will be naming it as a connection.py. This connection.py is responsible to make a connection to the database. Now to make a connection to the database, we need the MySQL package. So I will be importing MySQL dot connector, and I will be calling it as dbc. Then I will be creating a class, and that class would be db connector, and inside this db connector class there will be a function def init. So init is the constructor class, default constructor, which would be the first parameter would be self, and it will be making a connection. So the connection would be done by self.con variable. So whenever a object to the class of db connector is being created, that object will be calling self and assigning that self value to the con. And what this con would be having? This con would be having a connection to where dbc.connect, and it will be connecting to, we'll be saying that the connection would be having a host, and the name of the host would be localhost. You can write 127.0.0.1 as well, because 127.0.0.1 is the localhost for MySQL. But I will be simply writing here localhost, comma, and then I will be saying port, and the port in where this localhost runs is 3306, that is MySQL port, and the user is root. So far so good. And the password for my MySQL database is admin123. Let me check whether it was admin123 or not. Okay, password was admin123. Fine. So password is admin123, and in which database it will be making changes. So we'll be also saying that the database it will be using will be SS. Inside the database it will be making some changes. So far so good. Now it will be also having a function to hold the cursor variable. So enter and backspace. Okay, so it will be also having a variable named cursor. It would also be working on self. It will be setting the value to the self variable, and what it would return? It would return simply the connection. So return self.con, fine, dot cursor. So this cursor, this cursor is required to execute the SQL queries, and also will be requiring another function to close the connection, and also for the commit. So commit is something like to make the changes to the databases. So we'll be writing self, and what commit. So self dot con dot commit. So whenever this commit function is called, so whenever this cursor function is called, it will be returning the cursor, and this cursor function will be responsible. Inside that we will be passing on the query to execute the MySQL script, and to make the changes to the MySQL databases, we will be finally writing this, execute this line, that is commit. And also we will be requiring another last function, that is to close the connection. So we will be naming it as db def close, and it will also work on the self, that is the object of this particular file, associated with this object of the particular file, and it will be saying that self.cursor, the cursor which I opened in the cursor method, it would close that value, it would close that particular cursor, and apart from that also self.con.close. Fine. So this connection is responsible to make a connection to the database. Now the next thing comes is the creation of table. So table creation, I will be naming it as table and create and .py. So table creation means before creating any table we need to do a connection. So we will be doing what is that you will be importing connection, and we will be calling it as CNC, that is the connection. We will be creating a class, and the name of the would be table create. Maybe the name of the class will be table create, and it would be having a simple only one function, def create, and this, okay, create is a function, fine, and inside this create will be making a create. So maybe we can use the default constructor also. So whenever a object to the class is being created, it would get executed. So let's first of all make a self.obj. So this class objects obj, obj is a variable and it would be working on this class. What it would be holding? It will be holding cnc dot db connector, this one. So I have got the connection. Obj is now holding the connection to the database. Fine. Now let me write the query. So query is we need to create a table. So it's similar to whatever query we had seen in mysql. The query is something like that. So we'll be doing is that create table, and if the table doesn't exist, only then create the table. If not exists, the name of the table will be student, and it would be having fields. So user ID and username, username and also maybe subject, maybe, or maybe user ID, username, and username, and maybe subject. Now also you need to say what type of values it would be holding. So user ID is a integer type of, and it is the primary key, fine. And username is something like, username would be varchar, and it would be 20. Also subject would also be varchar, and it would also be 20. So is there any option for a word wrap? View, there is, okay, word wrap, I got it. Fine. So now we need to execute the query. So we need a cursor. So the cursor would be holded by my cursor, and this cursor can only be found, who will be having that cursor? The object, the connection string. So self.obj.cursor, still not so, okay, cursor, fine. So now this cursor would be executing this query. So my cursor dot execute, and it will be executing this simply query. Now this file would be called from another separate file. So that file will be named maybe final.py. So what you do, this final.py would be having is that import, and it would be, what it would be importing? It would be importing table create as maybe tc. Now we need to create an object, obj equal to tc dot table create. Now let me run the script, and before running the script, let me check whether SS is having any databases or not. Let me refresh. See, it is not showing any table. Let me move into my VS Studio Code and run the file python and final.py. Let me hit enter. Okay, so the command has been executed. Let me refresh and check whether the table, here is a student table. See, user ID, username, subject. So before ending this video, let me summarize what I did so far. So in the connection, I am using the mysql connector, and I'll be using this mysql connector, this variable, and I will be calling it as dbc. This package would be termed with the name of dbc. Now this is a init. Whenever an object of dbc connector, this particular object of this particular class is being created, the this constructor, default constructor would be called, and connect is this self.con. Con is a variable which is holding the connection to the string, to the database. Also I am saying that self.con.cursor, so the connection has an object cursor. This cursor is being required to execute any query. Also there is a commit. Commit is required for the ingestion query. After successfully cursor, inside that cursor query is being run, to insert any particular data into a database, this commit is being required to make the changes to the MySQL database. And after all these things are being done, there is also another method close, which says that the connection to the database has been closed, terminated. So this is the connection file. Then there is a table creation file. So there is also, I am using the init, that is the constructor, say, default constructor, and object. Inside this object there is a object to the, whenever we are creating the object to that connection class file, it is being the init function is called, and inside the init function there is a, inside that init function, so inside the init function there is something like, okay, so I think there is a small error, Dave. Okay, fine. So inside this init object db connector, so inside now here within the object there is a connection. Here is the query. So my cursor is now holding object.cursor. So self.obj, this variable, since it is holding the connection, so it will be also having another function cursor. And now my cursor.execute query, and in the final file we are running the script of the table create, and the table is being created successfully. So installing pip, then installing MySQL connector, and we also debugged that what is the correct line for MySQL connector. Then we created a database using Python. After that we have been successful in creating a table in MySQL Workbench executing Python script. So this is the progression we have made so far. In the later on videos we will be executing Python script to insert any data into the MySQL Workbench database. That's all. Thank you.